Abercrombie & Fitch. Now, this company has had an eventful history, having existed in what I would consider to be maybe 4 or 5 very different forms. I'm talking about multiple rises and falls, switching between different industries, ultimately becoming a controversial clothing retailer. The most successful of any of it, and I'm guessing the one that most of us associate with the brand, can be characterized by pictures like this. So in this video, I want to talk about all of it, how they got to that point, how they got away from it, and how they've been affected by all the changes. I know this seems like a somewhat modern company, but it goes all the way back to the 1800s. David Abercrombie was a real outdoors type person. He was a prospector, then a miner. He spent some time manufacturing gear for camping, so toward the end of that century, he fittingly opened a store that sold outdoors equipment. It was higher end stuff that was used for fishing, hunting, and of course camping. One of his customers was a wealthy lawyer named Ezra Fitch, who clearly also enjoyed outdoor activities. In 1904, he invested in that store, and that was the start of the Abercrombie & Fitch partnership, which oddly enough only lasted for about 3 years. The two of them weren't getting along all that well, so Abercrombie left the partnership and therefore the store that he had started, and Fitch continued operating it under that same name. A couple years later, he took a big risk by investing a bunch of his money to create a 450-page catalog, print 50,000 copies of it, and thankfully the risk paid off when customers started placing a bunch of orders from it. By 1917, the business was doing well enough to relocate into a 12-story building in New York City that would soon become their famous flagship store. It sounds funny when I say it today, but Abercrombie & Fitch became widely known as an upper-class retailer of equipment for outdoor activities, primarily for hunting. After Fitch sold his interest in the 1920s, the new leaders made some acquisitions that helped them build the largest collection of firearms in the world. They were seen as the store where you could find just about anything you were looking for, and even gained some publicity from their list of celebrity customers, including Theodore Roosevelt, Charles Lindbergh, Amelia Earhart, and Ernest Hemingway. In fact, this is pretty dark and unclear if it's even true, but it has been reported that Ernest Hemingway took his own life using a firearm that he bought at Abercrombie & Fitch. Over the following decades, they opened 2 more principal stores in Chicago and San Francisco, along with 6 other smaller stores strategically placed around the country. Their most successful year operating in this form was 1968, with sales of $28 million, but by the 1970s, things started to take a turn. Potential reasons for it would be the rise of discount retailers. Places like Target or Walmart were now selling comparable equipment at considerably lower prices, an issue that was compounded by a slower economy during those years where people were really looking for lower prices. They started reporting yearly losses, totaling to over $2.5 million throughout the first half of that decade, so the lack of money on hand forced them to cut back on their inventory available, specifically the really expensive stuff that they were famous for, resulting in some empty shelves and a hurt public image. In 1976, they filed for bankruptcy, closing all of their stores soon after and effectively ending the over 80 years run of the initial Abercrombie & Fitch, which you would really think would be the end of it. I can't imagine there were many people predicting that that name would ever have any further significance, let alone what it actually ended up becoming. But there was a sporting goods chain in Texas called Oshman's, who later became part of Sports Authority, who bought the name and the trademark and essentially the rights to open a new, very different store called Abercrombie & Fitch. So in 1979, they opened one in Beverly Hills that was much more in line with the Oshman stores rather than the previous stores, focusing on clothes and equipment for sports like basketball and baseball rather than camping and hunting. Throughout the 1980s, they opened bigger stores in Dallas and New York City, growing to 27 locations by 1987 with sales of about $50 million, meaning this new resurrected version of Abercrombie & Fitch technically grew to be almost twice as big as the previous version. The following year, 2 of those stores were closed by Oshman's, while the remaining 25 were sold to Limited Brands for $45 million. Now, Limited Brands was not concerned with sporting goods, but rather with clothing stores. Earlier in that decade, they had acquired a bunch of them, including Victoria's Secret and Lane Bryant. I think we're starting to see the evolution take shape into something more familiar here, but I would still call this a transitional period because the Abercrombie & Fitch that we all know didn't truly start to take shape until 1992, when there was a new leader put in charge named Mike Jeffries, a controversial figure, but however you feel about him, it's hard to deny the positive impact that he's had on the company financially. I think that we can say that he was the one most responsible for transforming the chain and growing it from $85 million in sales to $4.5 billion at their peak 20 years later. Over that time, they also grew from 40 stores to over 1,000. They went from losing money to profiting hundreds of millions millions of dollars. I mean, those are results that any retailer or any company at all could typically only wish for. In his own words, in 1992, we began to build a new Abercrombie & Fitch rooted in East Coast traditions with an Ivy League heritage. We positioned the brand to target a young and hip customer by offering high-quality, trendy, right casual sportswear and creating a unique, exceptional in-store environment which established an emotional connection with our customer. That's the thing, their whole image became about being young and cool and provocative. Their advertising became very revealing and sexualized. They were known for these black and white advertisements that almost exclusively featured young, white, muscular individuals. In 1997, they started publishing a magazine called A&F Quarterly that was controversial because it featured similar photos with nudity in some cases. There were a lot of protests against it, but it was effective marketing. It caught people's attention and made them see Abercrombie as a hip and attractive brand. And that image even translated inside the stores. I mean, there was no mistaking an Abercrombie & Fitch. Anyone that has shopped there during that 20+ year time period can tell you that it was a unique experience. The lights were turned down really low, the music was almost absurdly loud, they would spray cologne all over the place to give it a strong, distinct smell. There would be these models that worked there hanging out without a shirt on. It was craziness. The whole environment much more resembled a nightclub rather than a retail store, but if you were a teenager or in your early 20s, there was a good chance that you would think all of that stuff was really cool. But maybe not anymore. Abercrombie & Fitch has since fallen considerably, both financially and in terms of reputation. So I put together a list of 5 reasons that I believe to be significant behind their decline. Starting with some of the more obvious ones, rising competition. I'm talking about retailers offering cheaper alternatives like American Eagle Outfitters, but also the rise of the entire fast fashion industry has been a concern. Stores like H&M or Forever 21, commonly only a short walk away in the mall, offering a changing variety at cheaper prices. Traditionally, many Abercrombie stores have been located in shopping malls, which I suppose I should put as my second reason. A decline in mall traffic or a mall being shut down entirely could absolutely hurt sales. I've talked about this on the channel quite a bit before, so moving on to my third reason, individuality. I'm sure we all understand that the fashion industry is forever changing. Abercrombie found tremendous success with their very specific approach that can't be expected to work for decades. What may have seemed cool 20 years ago may just seem annoying or offensive today. I'll admit, I'm not an expert when it comes to fashion, but I believe it has evolved to become much more about individuality. Back in the day, teenagers across the country would be proud to wear that Abercrombie logo because it would help them fit in with everyone else. That was kind of the whole point. Wearing one of their shirts meant that you were part of the cool group, but now no one cares about being in the cool group. So in 2014, they even announced that they would stop putting that logo on everything. Another reason behind their decline could potentially be their failed store concepts. In 1998, they started a store called Abercrombie Kids, and as the name implies, it's similar to the original store, but for a younger customer. As far as I can tell, it's been successful. There are still many of them around today. 2 years later, they started another chain of stores called Hollister, and we all know how successful that one has been. It's always been a somewhat similar store, but with more of a laid-back California beach attitude. I would guess that you may be even more familiar with it because Hollister quickly became the most desirable part of the company, surpassing the Abercrombie stores in terms of sales in 2009 and maintaining that position ever since. That is all impressive, but Abercrombie was nowhere near as successful with their next 2 attempts. In 2004, they attempted a new concept called Roll. It was a clothing store meant for an older customer, like someone in their 20s or 30s, but it never caught on too well, growing to about 30 locations before being discontinued after only 5 years. Their next attempt was in 2008 with a store called Gilly Hicks. They sold women's intimates and loungewear, but yet again, it never caught on as well, also growing to about 30 locations before closing after 5 years. I should mention that Gilly Hicks did come back a few years later as a brand sold in Hollister and online, but overall, that's still not the most successful attempt. For my final reason behind their decline, I have to talk about their scandals. Abercrombie & Fitch has been involved in so many scandals that have collectively hurt their image and caused many potential customers to simply stay away. Just going through some of their bigger ones, in 2002 they were protested for selling these t-shirts that had offensive depictions of Asian individuals. They quickly pulled them off their shelves and the representative said, "We are very, very, very sorry." In 2004 there was a class action lawsuit settlement of $40 million. The claim was that Abercrombie was discriminating against minority applicants in the hiring process, and also that the few minorities that they did hire were expected to work in the back of the store away from the public. Interestingly, part of that settlement said that they also had to have more diversity in their marketing so that they wouldn't discourage minorities from applying for the jobs there. People also didn't approve of the fact that the store refused to sell larger clothing sizes for women. It took them until 2013 to announce that they would finally start doing it. And then there was even more backlash when their CEO, Mike Jeffries, infamously said that the brand was meant for cool, good-looking people. You may have picked up on the fact that most of these issues have a theme of being insensitive and excluding certain people. It really seemed like they only wanted young, thin, attractive, white people in that store, and sort of made everyone else feel uncomfortable or even discriminated against. So there you go, 5 reasons behind the decline of Abercrombie and Fitch. But that's not the end of it. Responding to the troubles, Mike Jeffries left the company in 2014, and in the following years, the new leadership implemented a lot of necessary changes. And I use that word necessary partially because in an official survey of over 9,000 people, Abercrombie was ranked the most hated retailer in the US. The changes were predictable enough though. I already said how they reduced the use of their logo, they changed the entire store environment so it was much less like a nightclub, they got rid of those shirtless models and stopped hiring people based on their looks. That entire Abercrombie image that we all came to know is essentially gone. I thought maybe a good way to convey that would be to compare the cover of their financial statement from 2002 to the one from 2021. The newer one obviously being more diverse, family-friendly, even less shallow maybe. Along with the marketing adjustments, the company has been switching up their product mix more often, has been more accurate in predicting new fashion trends, maybe even affecting some of those fashion trends to an extent with how much they have been talked about on TikTok and other social media. Becoming more relevant and raising sales have contributed to the impressive rise of its stock price, making it one of the better investments over the past few years, and overall it has been called one of the biggest comebacks in retail, proving that this company right here always seems to find its way back in unexpected ways, so it is probably going to be interesting to keep an eye on it to see where it goes next. Let me know in the comments, have you ever shopped at Abercrombie & Fitch? And if so, how old were you? What was your motivation for going there? How did you perceive the brand? Also, I'm curious, has anyone ever been there during one of their previous forms? I told you in the beginning, it's an eventful history, so any other thoughts you have about any of it, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.